So we've been talking about a little bit about that moment where I realized that I was a person of color and that moment that you realized that you were Black.
Yeah.
It might sound funny for some people to realize that we both had those moments, but we really did.
Yeah, it's horrifying and it's really happened. It really happened. Um, yeah. I mean, I guess I could talk first.
I'm happy to go first if you want.
Yeah, no, I mean, I grew up in a bunch of white spaces. My mother, you know, um, really just wanted us to have a private education. And so me and my brother, I have a twin brother, just growing up, we went to grade schools that were private and white and in the suburbs of Chicago, Skokie and that, and basically throughout college, basically. And so I going through my life, well, first of all, I remember looking in the mirror when I was younger in grade school and wishing that I was white. So like literally looking at my skin and just being really sad that I had brown skin and that it just felt like it felt ugly. Yeah, I didn't feel like I was attractive. And it felt like it was something, my skin made me something that made me separate. And in my actual experience, it did, like racism is ingrained in our school system. So it actually did, I've got a bunch of experiences of when I was in grade school and young kids saying racist shit to me, stuff to me. And so, I went through my life and went through college, came back to Chicago, went back to Boulder, Colorado, which is a very small white town in the mountains of Colorado, Boulder. And in that experience, that is around the time that Mike Brown was killed. And there was a lot of protests all over the world, except for in Boulder. There were no protests. And so I was full of emotion, full of rage, full of grief, and looking around and being like, this community is not feeling about this. They have no feeling about this. And I literally went to an open mic and nobody said anything. And I was like, at an open mic is the place where people would be talking about this, if any other place. And I was just like so sad. Even the people that I had moved there for were this, white community, wealthy community, and they were not talking about it. They did the whole, well, we love you, Soj. We don't really see you as a person of color, a Black person. And I'm just like, oh, okay. And so at that point, I really had decided that like, wow, y'all don't have the same experience as I do at all. You're not experiencing this in the same way that I'm experiencing it. It's not touching you. It's almost like you don't care. And so I was just like, I need to leave. So I went back to Chicago. And after that, I read the book Rock My Soul by Bell Hooks, which is about Blackness and self-worth, and really puts into context the effects of being in white society and the sense of self-worth in Black people. And it rocked my world. And I was just like, damn, my self-worth is really damaged because I've grown up in white spaces. And so I started just like really insisting and being very intentional about surrounding myself with Black people, with people of color. And soon all of my community was Black. and POC folks. And yet still, I remember, so this is the moment. I remember someone asked me for recommendations for healers. And I remember being aware of my thought process. So I was like, well, I have these 3 people in mind. I'm going to give them like 2, I think it was like 2 white people and 1 Black person. I'm going to give them these 2 white people because they'll probably feel more comfortable with them as the healers. And these people probably are more certified. In some way, I had created this, like, because you're white, it means that you're more certified and you're more qualified to like be a healer. And I caught myself in that moment and I was like, it's because I had just read this book and I've been processing so much about self-worth and value. And I was like, if I think that about this person as a healer, I think that about myself. I was like, oh my God, I'm Black. Like I literally,
Oh,
I think I said it out loud, which was such a trip because it was like this little seed of toxicity that was working its way up. And that was the moment where it had worked itself out of the soil. And I was like, whoa, I didn't even know you were in there. Like a piece of like metal that was stuck in your skin and you're like, and it like surfaces after years or something. It was kind of an embarrassing moment for me, you know, like, okay, well, that just happened. And really sad, you know, very, very sad to recognize that I had such a sense of like, that meant that I didn't value myself and my services, you know, basically. And then I thought about like what does that mean about how I'm looking at my friends, how I'm looking at my family, you know? So it was just like this whole.
it's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking, completely.
And yet it's so relatable because I think so many people feel this way and encounter this, and especially those of us who have grown up in like white surroundings.
Yeah.
You know? So I
Yeah.
don't think we're alone at all. I can share a little bit of my story. So I grew up in Northwest Indiana in a community that was mostly white. There were about 13 Indian families there at the time. And I was exposed to Indian culture all along. So we had the Indian side of me. We had something called Bal Vihar, which was those 13 families would get together in different people's houses. And then we call, all of our moms aunties. And so all the aunties some of the aunties were teachers, and they would like take the kids in one of the bedrooms because, that's the spaces we had in a house. And you'd have like the youngest kids in one bedroom, and then you'd have like the middle-aged kids in one bedroom, and the high school kids or whatever in another bedroom. And we'd all study something with our aunties, And then we'd all meet up in the larger space, which was the living room, where all the rest of the adults were like discussing something or watching something or something religious. And I grew up Hindu, and then we joined them, and we would sing chants. We would do chants together, and it was actually really beautiful. And then afterwards, we would all share a meal. Like everybody would bring a dish, and and that was kind of like what was in place of church, I guess you could say, because we didn't have a temple or anything like that. And so and then I went to India every year, so it was no secret that I was Indian. I always had like that part. But I was going to school in Maryville, Indiana. I grew up in Crown Point, but I went to school in Maryville because the towns are right next to each other. And all the kids were white, as far as I can remember, especially in elementary school. I think that changed a little bit more in high school, but elementary school, all the kids were white. And I got treated differently. And I was a very, very quiet, shy, naive kid, if you can imagine that. Because I don't think that myself that way anymore. And I don't think most people do. But I was very, 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 very shy. And so I didn't talk a lot. So I naturally had trouble making friends anyway. But there was so much like pointing out of me being different. There was like, does your mom eat snakes? And just things that are ridiculous. But and like I remember coming back with henna on my hands because I'd go to India every year too. So I had that experience. And I'd come back with henna because I'm going to a wedding. And it wasn't popular at the time. It's not like Madonna popularized that later, but because it took a white lady to popularize it. But at the time it was not acceptable. And then I was told I would have a disease on my hand, and just like there's so much stuff there. But so what I had to do in that time was adapt to white culture. I had to be part of white culture. So at some point, from taking so many insults, I think over time, maybe around 4th grade, 5th grade, somewhere around there, I started catching on a little bit of like what to do to become accepted. Because I was so tired of being harmed in this way. Like, you've got to figure it out. You've got to figure out what white culture is awfully fast. Like, otherwise you're not going to be accepted. So I started talking like white people more, because I'd come back with an Indian accent sometimes coming back from India. And like, so I made sure I didn't have that going. I, made sure I looked like them. I remember in 6th grade, made sure I learned how to shave my legs, because we don't shave our legs in India, we wax. But I had to figure that out, all these just things, and my mom is not white. She doesn't act white at home. So I had to figure that out by myself. And so I became very white, to the point where like I started then like rebelling against my own culture in order to maintain that whiteness. And I remember like my mom, bringing up things of our culture, and me like looking at it like, oh, that's less than somehow, and just ridiculing it over time as I got older, and started almost like I just turned into a white person, somewhere along the lines. And then I just fast forward some years now, and I remember being at the Shambhala Center, and this is like in my
Turning into a white person.
yeah, and that's another thing, when you learn the norms and values of the white society around you, it's a privilege, actually, right? Like, so like I know how to talk to people in a certain way, and I can translate things in a certain way, and I know all the body language that's like that you need to use and all that. And so I walked through the world like that. And it really wasn't until in my 20s, I'm 42 now, so this is like in my mid to late 20s, I think I was, when I started coming to the Shambhala Center, which is a Buddhist meditation center. And I just remember there was a people of color scholarship that you could apply for, to go on retreats. And I remember Alice Dan, a person there, who asked me, did I want to look at this scholarship? And I remember getting mad. Like, I remember being like, well, why do you have to separate me out? And I remember saying that, like, why are you separating me out as a person of color? Like, I'm just a person. And, I remember that moment really clearly, because I think, there's just a part of me that like wanted to be accepted. And because I'd spent so long trying to figure out how to be accepted in this white culture, that like to tell me now that I have to think of myself as a person of color, like I didn't want to do that, because it was like there was a fear, I think, for me, like of like being thought of as different again. Like, I don't want to go back to that. That was a horrible time in my life. Like, I have so many scars from that time in my life. I don't want to go back to that again. And here I am in this white Buddhist, Western Buddhist center, which I think personally, I think I was somewhat attracted to, because you also are attracted to white spaces because you know how to navigate them.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, that's like how it was for me. And so then, you know, I was like, I don't want to be thought of as different.
Mm.
But that moment made me start to think differently too. I was like, well, wait a minute. Like, why don't I, what is this scholarship about? And like, why don't I want to be included in this? And why are they having this? And I started like really diving in, you know, and then it really wasn't until a few years later when became involved in the Imagining Peace Conference, and I was working with young people from Englewood and from uh, Humboldt Park, and they're people of color. And I realized how connected we were to get, you know, I felt more connected to them almost than my Sangha, which is white. And so I had to like, look at that. And then when my Sangha started treating me different and treating us different and othering us more, then it really started looking into it, you know? And I'm trying to think if there was a moment. For me, the moment was this people of color scholarship, you know, and it wasn't like yours. It wasn't exactly like yours of like, oh, I'm Indian. I always knew I was Indian but I switched. I could go
Mhm.
to my Indian side, and I was compartmentalizing it. I'll go to my Indian side and I'll be Indian there. I'll be with my family in a certain way. And then I'm going to be white in these other spaces because that's how I know how to navigate the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, thanks for sharing all of that.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah. I mean, it just makes me think about like our those moments when you have those little light bulbs go off. For me, after that, I got to look back and think like, I thought I was fitting in. I thought I was, you know, assimilated enough to like be accepted. But all along the way, I realized that even though I've assimilated to whiteness, I'm still being rejected in all different ways, you know?
Yeah.
Might as well just be exactly who I am.
Yeah. It's a thing. It's like, you know, now it upsets me almost like when people of color who were like, I mean, that was me, you know, so I understand where they're coming from. I really get it. But it's so upsetting because when you're a person of color that's just like denying yourself of this part of you, and you think that this is like the white world just is accepting of you, it may
Why do we
look
have
like that.
race so much? Like I have, you know, a lot of those, you know, I've experienced a lot of folks who are Black, brown people who are like, you're making trouble. Like, it's not a big deal. Why do you have to talk about race so much? Like, there's nothing, you know, it's just like all of that kind of, where it's like a fear of just accepting that there is this dominant reality, you know, that is really harmful. And just wanting to just not see all of the ways that that is true, which is a lot of work because it's so inundated in our world. But it also is like if your proximity to whiteness is getting you through life and you know giving you a lot of privileges, then you have to really weigh what the value is for letting go of that, you know, for yourself.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, it is like, it does give you certain advantages. I mean, it's still like I have white things in me still, like that I haven't removed, you know, like I'll still like do the switch sometimes and I notice it in myself. Although I'm willing to less and less nowadays. You know, I'm willing to less and less. Like I'm so suspicious now. It's like, wait a minute, why do I have to do this? Why have I been doing this for so many years? Like, why do I have to do this for you? Why don't you switch for me?
like, why are you so special that I'm changing like my whole experience of being comfortable and like embodied to make you happy? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if people really want to, are really serious about this thing that they say about like, we're all basically good and we're all one world and we're all the same. If people are really serious about that, I mean, underneath that's true. But like, if you really want that, then like, you can't make everyone be like you. You can't expect the whole world to cater, you know, to you. Like it's, you have to understand that other cultures and other, people have something to put into the pot, like I come with a whole culture behind me, and I'm not giving that up anymore. Did we freeze?
Yeah, it's freezing a ton. But I think we can end it here. I caught bits and pieces of what you were saying.
Yeah, just
But
that I'm not giving up my culture. I'm not giving up myself for you. Like if you want to do this together, like you have to be willing to accept who I am fully. And you can't say I don't see your color and all that other garbage that, people like to spew out. Like you don't get to do that. You better see you better see my color, and you better see my culture, because that's what I come with.
and in this moment throughout all time, as people say, like, this is who I am and this is how I want to be treated, and to be able to respect that, like, done with the whole like homogenization of culture, like it's a lie. It doesn't work and it's harmful. Like if someone says like, this is my culture and I need you to respect it this way, because these things are important to me, then like make space and listen for that. And also that we're complex enough human beings that I just think that we've been so, I talk about this all the time, but we're more complex than we're given credit for. We can hold way much more than we're given credit for. So it's like everyone, let's expand beyond this homogenization of culture. We can hold everybody. We can. And it's a reflection of nature, all of the species and the cycles and everything is working together, and we really have to align with that.
Yeah. And I have to add this because I feel like I need to say it. I had another aha moment maybe about 5 years ago. And that was around caste privilege.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
went to a talk at University of Chicago and heard a talk basically on caste, on caste in India. And when we Indians in the United States grow up here in the United States, our parents don't necessarily bring up caste much. Some do and some don't. I think it's different for different people. But for me, caste wasn't a thing that was brought up much. Although I was always aware of it because I went to India, I traveled, and I was always really like, it always thought it was fishy. And then when I heard this talk on caste, I asked this ignorant question. At the time, I didn't realize how ignorant it was, but I raised my hand and I said, I was crying and I was like, what can I do, as a South Asian woman here that grew up in the United States, didn't know much about caste. What is my sense of responsibility, or what can I offer? And the person that responded said something along the lines of, you need to look at your caste privilege. And, what do we tell white people? You need to look at your white privilege. You need to look at your caste privilege. And I was blown away. I was like, what? And then, I the last 4 or 5 years, I've dived in a lot further and deeper and realized that there's a whole other layer of privilege that I hold that I wasn't even aware of, that that really does, even though I'm here in the United States, still impact the whole, like everything is so connected that we
Mm.
can't even ignore those parts of ourselves that, we didn't grow up in, but that's who we are. It's in our blood. It's like, it's in our blood. Who we are is in our blood. We can't ignore it. So it's like, it's also like when I say this about whiteness, yes. And, I think like for myself, I realize that I have oppressor blood and I have oppressed blood.
Right.
And it's really a combination of both. And we have to all be willing to look at those two things, I think, all of us. But
Mhm.
yeah, but I just want to put that out there because I think it's important especially in the South Asian context to just not be like, oh, and this happened to me, like whiteness is impacting me. Yes. But
Mhm.
I was also impacting, other people in this way.
Right. Yeah.
And we can hold all that complexity.
Right. Everything is intersectional, you know? Um, so in all the ways that we can hold ourselves accountable, what are the ways that we have privilege and how can we own up to it and say, okay, I'm gonna let go of this idea that like, I'm not oppressing anybody in some way. I'm just a marginalized identity. So it's like, it's all weaving in and out all the time. So it's diligent work. It is diligent work. And look at where we are right now. So I think it's worth it. Like we're in a place right now where the world feels so, it's worth it to unravel and do all of the work to get us out of this place, to move us through this place
I agree.
into, into another option, because we have another option. We have infinite amounts of options.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.